Once upon a time, there were 3 brothers who went out into the forest to make an honest living. You know, the kind of guys who paid their taxes and followed all the rules. Well, one day they heard some drumming and singing, and they followed the noise until they came to a clearing where they saw a golden goose laying a golden egg. And the goose said, "Whoever catches me will own all my riches." So the brothers looked at each other and thought, "Hey, we don't want any part of that." They weren't greedy, not like those princes in other fairy tales. No, they just wanted to take the golden goose home and start their own little farm. And so the youngest brother lay down in the grass, put his jacket over his face and waited. And sure enough, the goose landed right on top of him, and he covered it with his jacket and carried it home. Now, when they got home and opened the jacket, the goose had disappeared, and in its place was a beautiful princess who said, "I'm very much obliged to you for rescuing me from certain death. But I must warn you, you can only look at me from behind or I'll turn into a frog." The princess then hopped away into the pond in her backyard. Now, the youngest son loved that princess more than fish, so he built a tower so he could look into her pond. But after he stared at her for quite some time, she turned into a beautiful young woman and climbed up his tower. She explained that she'd been cursed by a wicked witch, but only a kiss from someone who wasn't born of woman could break the spell. Since the youngest son wasn't born of woman, you know, because he popped out of a golden egg, he leaned in and gave her a big smooch, and the spell was broken. Now, they lived happily ever after, and I mean really happily. In fact, so happily that the king threw a huge party inviting 8 of their closest friends. And they all danced and drank and feasted for days. In fact, they partied so hard that they completely forgot about their chores. You know, like mowing the lawn or taking out the trash. Oh boy, were they in for a surprise. When they finally came to their senses, they stepped outside and saw that their beautiful gardens had become a wild jungle and their houses were overrun by animals. There was a pig wearing the king's crown rooting around in the royal bedroom. A cat was drinking milk from a bowl on the kitchen table, and a mouse was playing the king's harp. And then they remembered what the princess had said, "Beware, for I am a witch." And they ran away from the party as fast as they could. But she was too quick for them. She transformed herself into a big bad wolf and chased them all through the forest. And they ran until they came across a deep, dark cave. They hid in there while the wolf searched for them. But once she smelled their fear, she found them and gobbled them up one by one. And if you don't think that's sad, you haven't met the narrator. He cried and cried until his eyes were all red and puffy. And that's why whenever you hear a sad story, they say to have some Kleenexes ready. Because believe it or not, this story gets even sadder. The youngest brother had a pet bird, and he told it everything that had happened. And the bird flew back to the princess and told her what the wolf had done. So the princess took an axe and went into the forest to find the wolf. And when she did, she chopped off her head. Then she brought all the brothers back to life, and everyone lived happily ever after. Well, almost everyone. The king and queen never forgave the narrator for making them feel so depressed, and they banished him from the kingdom. And that's why he wanders the land to this day, telling his sad stories to anyone who'll listen. And if you try to cheer him up, he might just turn you into a frog. The end. You know, I used to tell people that fairy tales always have a happy ending. Not this one. It's a little darker, isn't it? But you know, I think it's a good message for kids. If you throw a huge party and forget your responsibilities, well, something bad is gonna happen. But you know, they're still fairy tales, and in the end, everything works out. Well, except for the narrator. Poor guy. Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this video, hit the thumbs up button. It really helps us out. And stick around to the end of the next video to see what happens when a baby throws a tantrum. It's scary.